Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in today. I'm Joe McCoy, Director of Alumni Relations, and on behalf of the University of California, San Francisco Nursing Alumni Association and the School of Nursing, welcome to the 2021 Latinx Excellence Panel. We invite you to submit questions by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll save time towards the end of the program to answer as many questions as time allows. I will now turn over to our co-host, Adrian Espinosa. Adrian's a 2015 graduate of the MEPIN program and a recipient of a 2020 UCSF Campaign Alumni Award, one of the university's highest alumni honors. In the past, he served as the chapter president of the National Association of Hispanic Nurses, and in 2019, he established a Latinx nursing conference focused on increasing diversity in the profession. Adrian is also the current president of the UCSF Nursing Alumni Association. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you, John. Can everybody hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. We're good to go. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know we're all, busy in our pertinent jobs and responsibilities. So I want to thank you for joining us today in the spirit of Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month. I think it's great to have everyone join us here and our speakers today. I think it's important to highlight the importance of community, culture, and our careers in nursing. So I want to thank everyone once again for being here today. And just to, before I actually introduce our great panelists that we have here, I wanted to share a gift of song. As part of culture and expressing and sharing, I think it's always a beautiful thing to also share different skill sets, different forms of art. So I have a guest, a friend of mine, who goes by Moni Canta. So Moni sings, and she is kind enough to be joining us today to share a brief song to kick off our Latinx Heritage Month panel. So if we can get Moni to log on here, and there she is. And Moni, there we go.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Hopefully this song will kind of set a good mood for a good day and just really value our heritage as Latinos in the Bay Area. Here we go. So it goes a little bit like this. It's called México Lindo y Querido. Voz de la guitarra mía, al despertar la mañana, quiere cantar su alegría a mi tierra mexicana. Y yo le canto a sus volcanes, a sus praderas y flores, que son como talismanes, el amor de mis amores. México lindo y querido, si muero lejos de ti, que digan que estoy dormida y que me traigan aquí, que digan que estoy dormida y que me traigan aquí. México lindo y querido, si muero lejos de ti, que me entierren en la sierra, al pie de los Magallanes, y que me cubra esta tierra, que es cuna de hombres cabales. Voz de la guitarra mía, al despertar la mañana, quiere cantar su alegría a mi tierra mexicana. México lindo y querido, si muero lejos de ti, que digan que estoy dormida y que me traigan aquí,
Bravo, gracias, Moni. That's on behalf of all of us because we don't want everybody's volumes up. But thank you so much. I knew you would share such a beautiful gift of song and for contributing to our Latinx Heritage Month. Thank you so much, hon.
You're welcome.
All right. So thank you. Thank you. Take care. So thank you, everybody. So hope that, brought you some good feelings as we go ahead and introduce our guest panelists today. So once again, my name is Adrian Espinosa. I'm an alumni 2015 at UCSF. I'm from the Bay Area, San Jose, California, and I'm currently practicing as a family nurse practitioner at Bay Area Community Health, and I also work part-time as a nurse case manager at Kaiser. One of our great panelists today we have here is Professora Rosalie Bravo. She is dedicated to promoting diversity in education and academia. Born and raised in San Francisco, she is first generation and graduated from the UCSF Acute Care Nurse Practitioner Program in the year 2000. She joined the UCSF School of Nursing faculty in 2006. She works as a nurse practitioner in an urban clinic where 90% of her patients are from Latin American countries, and the majority are undocumented immigrants. She is currently the specialty director of the ACNP program and vice chair of academic programs in the Department of Physiological Nursing. Un aplauso, Professor Rosalie Bravo. Next, we have Assistant Professor Stacy Torres. She's a proud first-generation college graduate born and raised in New York City. Her research and teaching interests include gender, health and mental health, the family, urban communities, aging and the life course, and qualitative research methods. Her projects include a qualitative in-depth interview study of 75 elders, which expands upon her research on aging in place with a special focus on minority and immigrant aging in upstate New York. Thank you, Professor Stacy Torres, for being here today. And then we also have our Assistant Dean, Joe Zavala, is originally from Peru and lived in 8 countries before his family moved to Southern California. He attended Long Beach City College, CSU Long Beach, and the University of Miami. His academic research includes colonial and post-colonial travel narratives, construction of cultural identity, and South American literature and history. Throughout his career, he has dedicated himself to advancing college equity and creating an inclusive learning environment by removing systemic barriers impacting underrepresented and low-income students. So once again, I want to welcome all of our esteemed panelists to today's event. Thank you. So we're going to start off with some questions here. So at any time, if anybody has any questions or any thoughts I'd like to share, we have the chat room open. I'll be monitoring some questions and we'll go with the flow here and see, how we're engaging here and what's of interest to everybody. Okay, so I wanted to start off with the first general question. If our panelists can please share a little about your professional journey or path and how that experience was for you, and also how it intersects with Latinx Heritage Month. What does Latinx Heritage Month mean to you? Anybody can volunteer, take it away.
I'll go first. With regards to that, what does Latinx Heritage Month mean to me? I think it's a tremendous opportunity for us to celebrate our incredible multi-ethnic, racial, historical, and cultural diversity, right? And most importantly, I think it's an opportunity to remind folks of the power of defining who we are as opposed to being defined by others. That's something that I constantly preach and talk about in the classes that I teach or in the courses that I taught, that there's incredible power to define ourselves as we wish, as opposed to being defined by others.
Thanks, I'll jump in next. First of all, I'd like to say that I identify as Chicana. I'm old school, Latinx. I'm still trying to embrace that. But I certainly echo Assistant Dean Zavala's sentiments about the meaning of Latinx Heritage Month. I would add to that it's an opportunity for us to be visible, to be truly visible. I think all of us celebrate our heritage every day, but during this month, we have opportunities like this one today to be visible and speak about our experiences.
And I guess I'll go next. So this is a special time for me to reflect with more determination and maybe more attention than I do on a day-to-day basis, to appreciate my roots and to remember my ancestors and the journey that brought my family to this country. My father's from Chile, and growing up in New York City, I grew up in an environment which was very Caribbean focused because we had a lot of Puerto Ricans around and people from Dominican Republic. Now there are more immigrants from Mexico. And I remember feeling, kind of insecure at that time. I'm a child of like the 80s and 90s. I didn't have that representation and that visibility. I remember going to the library and finding out, like, okay, who has a Spanish surname that's famous, and getting very excited. I would learn about like Gloria Estefan and etc. And so I'm really excited that our visibility is growing, and there are many things to be proud of, but there's still a lot of work to do. And so that's where I carve out this time to really think about that, to appreciate where I've come from, to appreciate where I'm going, and to recommit myself to the research and issues that matter to me and my community. So time to connect to community too is very important to me in this time.
Thank you. And if I may share as well, for myself, I grew up with very humble upbringings. My parents were field workers in the Salinas Valley. And from the very beginning, they always said, "Mijo, if you have the opportunity to go to school, it's something you need to really value and appreciate." And it did, and instilled in me a great value. And they would take me a few times out there to see if, how it felt to pick, some of the crops and stuff. And I was like, "Híjole, this isn't for me," but I really appreciated what they experienced. So with that, being able to pursue my education and later now have these opportunities and be amongst great colleagues where we can be proud of our, like we said, our roots and what we're representing, I think is something that I truly admire, and with everyone that's in this room, and also just am proud of, and I'm very thankful for this platform as well. So thank you, everybody. Another question here, talking about traditions and cultural traditions from past and present with the family, as we kind of touched upon right now, what role do you think these traditions played in sort of cultivating the person you are today in your professional and your personal life? How do these intersect? How do they, sort of help you become you?
Well, I think the strong family tradition has been really important to me, knowing that I always have the support of my family, even though I didn't have guidance to go to college. My parents were working class, also came from very humble origins, but still knowing that they would support me in my pursuit of an advanced degree or an undergraduate degree even was amazing, because they didn't understand what that meant. So I'm fortunate to still have my family here. I have my 89-year-old mother in San Francisco, my adult children in San Francisco, and my granddaughter, my nieta, also in San Francisco. And it's and I really think that tradition helps me with my drive to keep going and to contribute.
Yes, I could jump in here. So even though, as I had mentioned before, we didn't have I didn't feel growing up I had a lot of visibility of people that looked like me or shared some of the touchstones of my family's journey, on the television shows that I was watching. My father, who passed away recently, always inspired a lot of passion and pride in the special foods from Chile, in sports, in literature and art from Latin America. And I would say too, I always felt, even though if he didn't quite have the tools to guide me in terms of knowing how to navigate all of these bureaucracies involved in pursuing higher education, I always had his support. And the last jobs that he worked in New York, he was an elevator operator, he was a porter, he did building work, and then he was a doorman. And we would go visit, like Adrian, his job site. But he always said, this is not for me. I don't want you to live sort of a life where you have to like be supervised like I am and punching a clock and have to fight even for the right to have a chair, to have a break when you're, to just get a rest for your feet. So I've really come to reflect, especially since losing my father in May, on all of the gifts that he's given and all of the wonderful stories that he's given me throughout my life. And he lived many lives. He worked in mines in northern Chile. He worked on ships and went all over the world before he came to this country. He had a lot of adventures when he arrived in this country, undocumented, and navigated his way to New York. And so I think about those stories in the context of the great Latin American writers and poets. And I really think that my father, again, was just a wonderful storyteller. And I find that helps me connect to my work and my spirit these days.
I would add, it's my story is slightly similar to Stacy's. I mean, I mentioned before that I had lived in many countries prior to coming to Southern California. So we were always the new kids every time we went somewhere, right? It was like every time we went somewhere, we were asked, where are you from? Right. And it used to annoy me when I was a kid constantly, or how come we're the only ones that are being asked this, right? And then when we moved to Southern California, we were the only Peruvian Basque kids that we knew of, right? And I remember going into 6th grade and taking my first ever standardized test, where you had to fill in the bubbles in the Scantron sheet, and raising my hand when it came to like racial one, because I didn't know what to fill in, right? There was no 5th bubble for Joe, right? Or his siblings. But what my parents definitely instilled in us is it was this belief that it was okay to be different. It was okay to feel different and value otherness, but also try to understand and recognize similarities, right? Because we always had to try to figure out a way to fit in into every community, into every country, into every environment that we went into. And it's something that I've definitely, learned from my parents and definitely have taken into every professional and personal relationship that I've been involved in. Is I come in first and foremost trying to understand, trying to value what I might perceive as different, right? And also, most importantly, try to identify commonalities with that other person that I might perceive initially as different, because it is in those commonalities and also in the valuing of those differences that you could build that community, right? That you could build that understanding and that awareness of value of what we have around us. So it's, at first, like I said, I didn't like traveling as much. Definitely me and my siblings didn't like being the new kids everywhere. But I think with time behind us, we've definitely come to understand what it has brought us to and the mindset that we have and our ability to engage with others that I definitely understand and value way more than I did before.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Zavala. I think you actually touched on the next part I wanted to elaborate on a little bit, as far as how we feel like our heritage, helps us bring a different perspective or an added perspective to the profession, or, our work environment, both in nursing and academia. Does anybody else want to touch a little bit upon that, about how the cultura, has helped you maybe have an added lens or a different lens in the work that you do?
I'll briefly just jump on it. When I was a grad student at the University of Miami, I was fortunate enough to teach a course on nationhood and cultural identity. And we read this great book called Dreaming in Cuban, where we explored Cuban identity and what it meant to be Cuban. And I remember I had about 25 students in my class, and I opened the discussion that day, and I asked my students to define what Cuban meant. And to my surprise, there were 25 different definitions of what Cuban meant. But the most important definition that I got was from one of my students, who said, there are mornings where I wake up and I'm Cuban, or I feel Cuban. There are mornings where I wake up and I feel American. There are mornings where I wake up and I'm Cuban American, others where I'm American Cuban. There's mornings where I wake up and I'm Jewish. Because, and there's mornings where I never think about any of this, and I'm just me. It reminded me, and it's a constant reminder for me to understand the incredible diversity and value that folks bring to the table, our students, our staff, other stakeholders, and to value those differences and not to assign labels to folks.
If I may share, Stacy, Rosalie, I wonder if I have any of my professors from when I was in the program. They're probably gonna laugh at me right now because they'll remember distinctly. I was very, very committed to my comp to graduate from the program on writing about the term or the concept of susto, and many times in the Mexican cultura and other Latin American countries, but mostly a lot really concentrated in the Mexican American or Mexican cultura. A lot of our patients come in believing that from one day to another, due to a traumatic event, that they are something instills fear or sudden trauma, and it can cause diabetes right away. It comes in, and that was something that I kept seeing with patients, and I just I wanted to explore a little bit more about it. And how do we acknowledge this in the culture and the cultura, and how do we have a discussion about it and talk about, yes, stressors and different things that can affect the body that can lead to diabetes, but also not to downplay this feeling, because I still see it today. I mean, even younger generations, people in their 20s who still are raised with this thought and idea of susto. So I really appreciate this opportunity, when I was going to graduate from UCSF, also to write more about it, and also even now in practice to know, and I've presented on it before too, but to be able to understand and be able to have that dialogue with patients, because it is something that's very culturally specific, and something that I used to think, oh, my mom and my dad used to tell me about it, and I thought, oh, it's just older generations that probably won't hear much about it, but to see that it's still relevant and to be able to have the opportunity to sort of understand it and be able to touch on it has been something that I really appreciate. Also, coming from a Latino background, and growing up Chicano, which I also identify with, Rosalie, and in my communities.
I guess I would just add, I've been thinking, I guess it's as sort of comes with entering midlife as well. I'm 41, so I'm kind of seeing the arc of my life and thinking about, again, where I've been, where I'm going, what can I contribute, and thinking about this idea of always feeling a perpetual outsider, especially in academic spaces, as Rosalie had mentioned. It's very difficult when you are the first to go to college, the first to do this, the first to do that. It's just a lot of uncertainty. But I've come in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years to really appreciate also having a foot in different worlds. And so it's not, a sense of, oh, I don't fit in here, I don't fit in there, but now I feel like I belong a little bit to many places. And so I think that has definitely shaped the perspective I've brought to my profession, kind of a sense of that journey and that struggle and that climb, and being able to see maybe some things that others who don't have my mix of intersections and social locations do. And in terms of my research, one of the things that I'm very interested in is the life course, and thinking about, how we travel through life and the different challenges and our histories. What does that do as we're growing older? And a lot of times, in communities faced with different hardships, discrimination, migration histories, there can be a lot of, accumulated inequality and structural inequalities. And so I've been thinking again about, these histories, and especially with my research participants for this book that I'm desperately trying to finish, and I am seeing the light based on my dissertation research in New York City. That project focused on older adults and how they're aging in place and aging in their communities, and how do they use neighborhood ties to support themselves as they're having more problems. And one of the challenges there, as it's happening, of course, in the Bay Area, was gentrification. And so people were being displaced out of their neighborhood places where they went to for support and connection. But that wasn't their first experience of displacement. A lot of people had been displaced in the late 50s and early 60s due to, quote unquote, urban renewal projects. And so they lost homes and they lost neighborhoods. And some of them them were able to find themselves back. And then some of them were displaced again in their migration and immigration journeys. So, they've had multiple cycles of displacement. And that's something that, resonated with me, given a little bit of my cultural background in history, especially my father's Chile, it was a very chaotic time in the 70s with the coup. So anyway, that's a little bit, I guess, of a response to that great question you posed.
So I would say that a perspective that I think I bring that is different than some of my white colleagues, my white faculty, is that I have always experienced being the only one. So as an RN first, in working in an ICU, I was the only Chicana, the only Latinx person in that ICU. Even in elementary school, I grew up in the Outer Sunset. The Outer Sunset was all white. So I was one of two in my elementary school. And then when I became a graduate student at UCSF, I was the only one in my cohort, in the ACNP cohort. And today, I think about my students that are in the AG-ACNP program, and there's only two, and it's 20 years later. And so I think that experiencing this brings a different perspective to our Latinx and BIPOC students. We understand that there are a lack of visible role models, people that look like us. And I think that that's really important because it gives us a different awareness. And that perspective is very rich and valuable, I think, for our students.
Thank you, Rosalie. I actually want to jump into our chat room. We have a question here from Tammy Ryan. She says, do you all speak Spanish? And if not, what is your experience with the community of Spanish speakers? Good question. Good question.
Tammy, that's a great question. So I will say that my parents were born in California. We did not grow up speaking Spanish in the household because my parents had such a horrendous experience in the San Francisco school system when they started school only speaking Spanish. And this has been something that has been really painful for me. So I have struggled to learn to speak Spanish as an adult. I speak much better Spanish than I did, certainly even in going through high school and taking Spanish classes. But especially when I look the way I do, and I am expected to speak Spanish. So I do the best I can. My patients are almost all Spanish speaking, and it's been a struggle. So I think it's important to recognize that Latinx people in the United States that do not speak Spanish fluently, do not have that fluency, still relate and identify with our community. And it's a struggle for us, and it's painful.
I guess I can jump in. I have a similar story to Rosalie's. My father just faced so much discrimination when he came to this country. Oh, sorry, he came to this country in 1975, and he wanted to change our last name. He really wanted to try to assimilate as much as possible, or kind of hide, because he was called slurs and just faced a lot of discrimination. So I didn't grow up speaking Spanish either, but I thankfully had wonderful professors in college, and I majored in comparative literature. So I was wonderfully supported in reconnecting to my language roots. It's rusty now at best because I'm not using it, unfortunately. The best, you use it or you lose it. So even lately, given that my father is not here now, I'm really trying to sharpen my skills and remember, the things that are starting to slip. I'm not watching Telemundo news with him anymore. And so I'm just trying, if anybody has a wonderful language school to just again, brush up on, but I think it's very important to acknowledge that history. And it's it's strange because even with my father, you know, I had such an accent when I would talk with him. I couldn't do it. But I remember, again, always being self-conscious, wanting to be able to connect more. And, you know, again, sometimes I can be coded in lots of different ways. In New York City, you know, there's just kind of a wider range of different immigrants from all over Latin America. So if people, you know, figure out my background, they have really high expectations, so that could be challenging. But I am forcing myself to use it more. So it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, my family moved to the States when I was 11. We attended mostly American schools prior to coming to Southern California, so we had an English background. And when we moved to the States, my mom forced us to speak Spanish at home. And we kind of didn't want to because we finally kind of wanted to fit in. But eventually we embraced it. I would say, yeah, I mean, I use Spanish all the time, like I mentioned before. I've post undergraduate work, I moved back overseas and worked in Peru, Chile, and Mexico. So it reintroduced me to my original or my primary language. What I also wanted to mention was that our communities that are under this umbrella of Latinx or whatever other term you want to use come in many colors and many flavors, right? There's my experience in Miami was unique because what I found out in my students was, from some of my students, was that they had some Spanish language skills, right? And they could speak 50% Spanish or 50% proficiency, if you want to add a number to it. But they were also limited in English, in their English skills. And there's members of our communities that are not fluent in one or the other. Okay, and that's something that we also have to take into account, that being proficient 50% in Spanish and 50% in English doesn't make you at 100%. And that's something that we definitely need to take into consideration. We have a lot of functioning literate people in like English and Spanish, but when it comes to college level mastery of either one of those, they're not there. So that's something that, as we were, I know one of the questions that we're going to have later on is related to access. That is something that we definitely need to take into account when we engage with our communities, right? It's the diversity, the linguistic diversity that we hold and that we're part of as well.
Similar to Dr. Zavala, I grew up in the house, my parents saying, you got to speak Spanish. And I was like, why? And, grew up speaking Spanglish too, a little bit of both, but I appreciate it because from my dad's side of the family, I would say I'm probably the only cousin who speaks it the most fluently. And it's really helped me with my patient population. So I'm really, but I'm always learning. I've had some moments with patients that, they teach me words and how to say, oh mijo, you could say this instead of that, gracias, so it's definitely a learning opportunity for all of us. So next question here I want to touch on here, discussing the significance of health equity and access issues. So being that we're in higher education, also working in clinics, what are some of these challenges in access and equity that we're facing right now in these scenarios? If you can share and touch on that.
So I can speak to the patient population that I see in my clinical practice. And I encourage the participants in this webinar to really take a look at the Latinx Heritage Month fact sheet, because it's really interesting and it really it delivers these really important points about lack of insurance in our community. We are of every other racial and ethnic group, Latinx people are have the highest rate of uninsurance. And of course, this affects access to health care. All of my patients are uninsured. And so what this requires from me as a provider is to be very, very creative in carefully selecting the most important laboratory tests when I prescribe for my patients, I have to understand that there's no insurance. So how are my patients going to afford? There's medications for diabetes, their metformin, their insulin. And so I always offer a good RX coupon, for example. Everything that I do, I think about with these patients and how they're going to be able to achieve optimal health care. I don't know that everybody's aware of this in the inpatient setting, because it overflows, because these patients get admitted to the inpatient setting. And I think that this is something that where we need to raise awareness for our students and for our colleagues in healthcare. And yeah, that's what I would have to offer.
Thank you. I guess I'll add, one of the things again, thinking about the accumulated inequalities over the life course and how that leaves you off potentially worse and worse health as you reach old age, if you're lucky enough, and fortunate enough and supported enough to reach old age. So I really appreciate the fine-grained details that Professor Bravo is bringing up, because they're so crucial. And I think about my research participants, and one of my research participants who became a good friend was a woman from Spain originally, who was undocumented, who worked in this bakery that I spent so many years in New York City with the older people who were connecting there. And she experienced a lot of exploitation as a low-wage worker. She didn't have insurance either. And she was very attentive to her health in the way that she could, but she just was getting, again, paid off the books, didn't have good health insurance. And after that place closed, and I kind of followed the participants, the older people, where did they go after? I also kept in touch with her, and she just had a string of very exploitative jobs. Some were in home care and child care, other retail spaces. And, sadly, she died early of breast cancer. She was 55 years old, and she had gone through all of the treatment. New York City does have some support for people who are undocumented and lack insurance. So they have a health hospital system. And so at one of the public hospitals, she was able to get treatment, but she had a recurrence. And it was sad, because at that point, she actually did obtain her legal status through marriage. And she was just so ground down. She went back to her family in Spain to die, because she just needed that support that she wasn't able to get in this country. And it's a real tragedy. So I think continuing to persist and advocate for health equity on these very real fronts is so crucial.
I would add in my area, which is services, and I could tell you that every role that I've ever stepped into, one of the first things that I always do is look at the structure that we have in place for the way that we offer services, right? What is the language that we're using to communicate and promote our services to prospective students or to students? What does our collaterals look like, right? What are our services structured like? So what we primarily do is we review and redesign what we have, right? We have to be student-centered, we have to be student-focused. And usually where I step into places initially, what I've seen is, well, this is what we do, right? This is how we offer our services. We've always done it like this, because it works for us. It works for us as an institution. It works for us as a department. It works for us as a school, without really taking into consideration, does this work for our students, right? It's the way that we're structured and the ways that we communicate with our students, limiting access, important access to services that some of our students need. So it's making sure that we redesign things in order to encourage more access than less, right? And I think that is always the key. How do we constantly have that frame of mind in order to promote more and more access and reach more and more of our students in order to provide the appropriate services that they need, and a proactive approach, definitely.
Yeah, and just briefly, I mean, this could be its own topic and stuff, but also, I I value the opportunity to also work in an FQHC, Fairly Qualified Health Center, with our patients that do have challenges to access, and many times are even afraid to come to the clinic because of ICE, immigration, different things like that. And I'm proud to be representing UCSF and being of Latino heritage, and know that I'm there for them, and I'm here to provide care for them. So I think in that sense too, I think knowing that this is a barrier, that's the kind of equity that I'm trying to bring in my own little world here, but I hope it's significant enough to every patient that I see. So I'm very thankful for that. So I'm going to merge two questions kind of right now to see so we can have a little time for Q&A. But I wanted to ask you, our panel here also, and what can we do cohesively or collectively as colleagues, as peers, etc., to help welcome and nurture more Latinx leaders, faculty members, and staff. What is it that we're missing in the nursing profession? How can we get more of us in here to educate our future and also to diversify it?
I'll briefly add to my last comments, which I think it's the task at hand for all of us is to review and redesign our communications, our services, and our curriculum, right? Do we have built-in barriers that we might not even be aware of, right? And unless we take a close look at what we have in place and understand what our students need and what they bring to the table, we will continue to do things as they are, right? And it's almost like this lens, this frame of mind of this constant awareness of how are we doing things and how can we improve access.
So I would add that I think outreach and mentorship are key. Outreach to increase the numbers of Latinx people that are entering healthcare. This has to start very early. I know Sergio Sanz really focuses on outreach. However, we need to get to middle school and high school students. And I mean, I was clueless about healthcare professions, even in my early 20s. So we have to get that word out that it's such a fantastic, nursing is such a fantastic field with so many different opportunities, and how it can truly change your life. Also mentorship, I think mentoring our students and mentoring our faculty.
I guess I would just add to, it brings to mind a segment I just saw last night on the PBS NewsHour about they've had like a multi-part series on nursing shortages, especially now. There were nursing shortages before. And to add to that, I mean, we have a diverse population and a population that's growing older. And I think of, all of the times that I spent with my father in healthcare spaces, and lots of communication issues came up for him. That's why he needed me there. He needed the emotional support. He was very nervous about his health, but he also needed that support interfacing with staff that didn't kind of understand his language. And even if they were speaking English, and he did speak English, weren't able to communicate things simply and clearly to him. And so one of the things I'm very concerned about generally, but also for our Latinx, many first generation students, are just perpetual cuts in funding for higher education. And so we have students, again, that do need additional support because they may be the first and the only, and staff and faculty who are there to mentor are stretched, thinner and thinner. And so I think, really being active about voting and advocating for restoration of these cuts in higher education, that is so important too, because it's such a structural issue, and all of us are putting in a lot of time and effort, sweat and tears into nurturing our students, but one person can only do so much. So that's something that I've been trying to keep my eye on and advocate where I can for just higher education funding.
No, yes, thank you, everybody. And I think that sort of ties into, one of the last questions also that I wanted to ask here, and how we can move from being, having Latinx Heritage Month to actually being actionable and proactively engaged. And you guys shared some great examples there as far as, if we don't create change, as Dr. Zavala said, and things are the same or stagnant, then we can't expect to see a new outcome. Also mentoring, as you said, Stacy and Rosalie, and being out there. I think sometimes even me early in my career, I feel a little overwhelmed because I do have a lot of students reaching out to me that want mentorship. But then I think, what a blessing! Like, what a blessing to be able to be there. And even if it's just, and I apologize, I'll get back to you, within a week if I want to sit down and take the time to really hash out their emails and talk to them. But being able to just do our part, pay it forward, because I think about all my mentors and everybody who supported me, and also my responsibility to give back and help people from all diverse communities reach their potential and their goals, and hopefully be on this platform like we are today. So thank you so much, you guys, for all that insight. So I want to see, I think we had a question here. Let me go up here from, our very own Sergio Sainz. Yes, Director of Recruitment and Retention. John, do you want to take it away with that question?
Sure. So Sergio's question is, as you all have broken barriers and many times still are isolating your fields, how do you open doors for others while still excelling in your profession? And maybe I see, Stacy, you're nodding your head. Do you want to take that on?
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging. It's just a perpetual, especially in an academic environment, or as I am on the tenure track, there are a lot of competing demands, and as Adrian had mentioned too, a lot of need. And so you do get a higher proportion of students that are seeking guidance. So, to echo Adrian's sentiments, I do the best I can to support people who are seeking my support, and to really appreciate the journey that they've gone through, and not to approach their experiences also from kind of a deficit model, but really looking at what resilience and what gifts that they bring, and learning from that as well. On the other hand, I think having to sort of look at to echo some good advice I've gotten, over the years, to look at a career as a book with many chapters, and to kind of see, okay, what do I need to know? What do I need to do now? Or what do I have energy to do now to secure, my footing in this institution? What are things that I can do in the next couple years to support the growth of this institution, and on and on. And so I think that that's the way that I've had to just balance all of these competing demands, is to try to prioritize and carve out time, or like Adrian said, if I can't do something right now, it doesn't mean never. It just means not right in this moment, but maybe a week from now, or maybe 2 weeks from now, or maybe I'm not exactly the right person, but maybe I can point you in the right direction.
Would anyone else like to comment on that?
Sure. I would say that I've had a blessed life, and I'm fortunate to have had faculty mentors along the way that talked me into getting a PhD. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here, and my life wouldn't have taken the trajectory or the pathway that it did. I have a debt, right? They help me, and it's my job to help others. I find the time. It's part of my job. It's part of who I am. Like Stacy said, it might not be right now, but I will get back to you, and I will make sure that whatever questions you have, I will, even if I don't have the answer for it, I will help you seek it or find it. Someone asked me a couple of years ago what my job is, and I would say my job is to help. That's my primary job. That's my primary responsibility.
Great. Thank you for that. And Professor Bravo, I think there's a question here, and I want to combine two questions that came in. So the question is, for those of us at the university, or maybe just in our everyday life, who are mentoring students or individuals from a Latinx background, what is some best practices or advice that you would give? But also, I think, in general, for first generation students, what are some of the best practices? How do you encourage and support their growth?
Sure, that's a great question. So I think one, you can sign up to be a first-gen mentor, and be a part of the first-gen mentor project at UCSF. It's very rewarding. I've done that since 2017. And if you have students who are traditionally underrepresented, BIPOC students, Latinx students, try to reach out to those students and understand that they often lack the historical perspective regarding available resources and pathways. And so if you can provide counsel to those students on an individual basis, as well as maybe a collective basis, I think that is extremely valuable and helpful to those students. I wish I had that. And so this is what I strive to provide for students, but I think anybody can do that, recognizing that, that these students, it might be maybe filling out a scholarship application, maybe even being aware of resources that are available is something that's very, very foreign. So I would just say, encourage everybody to get involved and reach out to those students.
Thank you for that contribution.
And John, I would say also just that with students, letting them know, be proactive. Don't be shy to ask for help. I am very thankful to this day to my peers who helped me form study groups for maybe certain topics that I had challenges with that they were great at, and I was able to help them in other areas. So I think letting them know that you're in a position and on a platform to pursue a great education at your institution. Use every resource possible. Interact with your peers. It's okay. Sometimes you might not have the best test score, you might not have the best day, but get back up the next day and go at it again, and know that you can do it. You're gonna accomplish it. You just have to take it a day at a time.
Great.
I think I would just like to add, I just wanted to add to, lessons I wish I learned, right, in my own painful journey with many missteps, that don't be afraid to claim space. Don't be afraid to talk to the professor, to do these things. I was so afraid, and I was so hard on myself. I was so working to kind of overcompensate for all the things I didn't know. And I wish I could tell my younger self, relax, you're okay, you're enough, you're good just as you are.
And I wanted to add to that, and maybe Adrian, you have a few thoughts to close us out on this, but also does the same hold for our alumni population too, who are Latinx. I mean, Adrian, you were the president of an organization that's for Latinx nurses. So do the same concepts apply in terms of encouraging that community of nurses and professionals to seek out mentorship or community?
No, definitely. I think at whatever level we are, I think we always have to remind ourselves, the importance of being humble, the importance of networking and supporting each other, because at any point in our careers, there will be times when we need that support in order to continue to excel and to support others. So I think being a part of these organizations in itself, it's still a learning process for me and many of us, and also in trying to reach out to our communities and spreading the word of how important it is for us to be present. And there's still not enough of us out there. So we need to continue the work in order for us to be, and I must say, I'm very humbled and proud to be our newly incoming president of our Alumni Association for UCSF, and I take that with such great pride, and I'm very thankful for this opportunity too, and to have all of you here.
So with that, I want to just once again thank you, Adrian, for co-hosting this program with the School of Nursing and the Nursing Alumni Association, Professor Bravo, Professor Torres, and Assistant Dean Joe Zavala. Right now, for closing remarks, we've invited Dean Gillis to share a few comments. Dean Gillis, welcome.
Thank you very much, John. And thanks to all of you who are here today, but a special thanks to our panelists. I've been double scheduled today, but able to be listening to you for about the last 20 minutes or so. And I'm reminded of how important it is to spend time in personal storytelling and reaching out to one another. You never really know who you're touching with some of the stories and some of the advice. So thank you for your personal generosity. I wanted to take a moment in closing to remind us of the story of Sarah Gomez Erlach. When we get to be in our building again, you will see that she is one of the women, one of the nurses depicted in our large mural outside the dean's office, the Making a Difference mural. Sarah Gomez Erlach was the first Hispanic, we called them Hispanic then, the first Hispanic graduate of the School of Nursing's program. She graduated in 1949 when our school was still at Berkeley. Sarah was born in 1922, so she would have been almost 100 years old. She was one of 9 children, and her family were refugees from the Mexican Revolution. She came to the United States and earned an associate degree in nursing at San Bernardino Valley Community College. She went on eventually and earned a bachelor's degree from Berkeley, which was our, as I say, our historical root program. And she focused on public health and education. She went on to earn a master's degree in public health at the University of Minnesota, one of the nation's finest programs focused on public health. So it's no surprise that she was well prepared to do what she did in her life, which included quite an extensive career in the military. She joined as a nurse cadet in World War II. She moved through the ranks to attain the rank of colonel. And she worked extensively in the state of California in the Department of Public Health, setting the stage for a series of clinics that would have significant local impact in primary care. She's known as an advocate for farm worker health and migrant health, and championed minority participation in the career of nursing, issues that go on today and that our panelists have spoken about. She was an early president of the National Association of Hispanic Nurses. And in fact, the history, which I don't know personally, but the history reports that she took over the helm of that organization at a time when the president was responsible for significant infrastructure improvements. And that organization, to which I know a number of you are members, goes on today with a very important focus on the health of Hispanic people. Sarah Gomez Erlach was awarded the UCSF Medal, which is the equivalent of the honorary degree from UCSF. She's received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Association of Hispanic Nurses. Her legacy, and this is what I want to close with. Here's a person who was a first. And like so many of you have said, being the first or feeling as though you're the only is not an easy position to be in. She didn't have the people to turn to and ask for help. She overcame the obstacles that she faced. She persisted. She was publicly minded. She focused on her community. She served the military. She served the public health of the people of the state of California. And for our school, she left the legacy of a significant scholarship, which we continue to give out today. It's an eponymous scholarship. So somewhere out there, we have a Sarah Gomez Erlach scholarship recipient today. Her fine example is one I think we should remember. And I want to say simply in closing, we thank you, Sarah Gomez Erlach, and we thank all of you who continue to do the work she does today. Because as a public institution and an institution committed to our Pride values, we matter, everyone matters. We want to continue to do the work that improves the health and education of our communities. Thank you so much.
Su alegría
como talismanes, el amor de mis amores, México lindo y querido, si muero lejos de ti, que digan que estoy dormida y que me traigan aquí, que digan que estoy dormida y que me traigan aquí, México lindo y querido, si muero lejos de ti, que me entierren en la sierra, al pie de los Magallanes, y que me cubra esta tierra, que es cuna de hombres cabales, voz de la guitarra mía, al despertar la mañana, quiere cantar su alegría.